The third day after my divorce from my ex-husband, he announced on a post that his new girlfriend was pregnant. The caption read, "Finally found you, lucky I didn't give up." And I, as that wife who couldn't have children, became the joke of our circle. Just as I was getting ready to resign and get away from it all, the CEO cornered me in his office. He tossed a medical report in front of me. "My mom is on my case, and you can't have children. Let's have a sham marriage, each gets what they need." I looked at him and nodded. After we married, he pampered me like crazy. Just when I thought life was finally on track, I discovered the whole truth after an episode of morning sickness. The moment my phone screen lit up, my world completely collapsed. On the cold glass was a post from my ex-husband Davis. An ultrasound printout was being held by a man's hand and a woman's hand painted with exquisite red nail polish. The woman was nestled in the man's arms, smiling like a blossom in full bloom. That face I knew well, it was Davis's colleague, Hannah. And that man's hand I knew even better, it had held mine through 3 years of marriage. The caption contained only a brief line, "Finally found you, thank goodness I didn't give up." Each word was like a searing branding iron, burning fiercely into my heart. "So finally you arrived, so what about the 3 years I spent? Good thing I didn't give up, so giving me up was the right choice?" Our mutual friend circle immediately exploded. "Congratulations! Davis is going to be a dad. Wow, that was fast, Hannah is really lucky." The comments section was a riot of congratulatory cheer, the well wishes crowded together like a swarm of buzzing flies, making my head spin. Mixed in were a few ambiguous jibes and knowing innuendos. "Davis really nailed it this time, unlike some people, who sit on the potty and don't." The rest of the sentence was replaced by ellipses, but the malice had already pierced the screen, aiming straight at me. Me, Bella, the woman who hadn't managed to have a child in 3 years of marriage. The ex-wife my former husband had tossed out on the grounds of being infertile. That joke nailed to the pillory labeled "a hen that won't lay eggs," on display for everyone to gawk at. I turned off my phone, but I couldn't turn off those voices. In the office pantry I held my cup, pretending not to hear the hushed gossip behind me. "Have you heard? Bella from design, her ex found a new woman and she's pregnant. They only divorced a few days ago. I heard it ages ago. She hasn't had any movement in 3 years, the problem must be with her. Look at Hannah, now there's someone who delivered. What's there to pity? A woman who can't have children has no standing in her in-laws' house. Davis did the humane thing, took 3 years before he left." Those whispers, like countless fine needles, pricked densely into my back. The hand holding the cup began to tremble, scalding water splashed onto the back of my hand, but I couldn't feel the pain. Back at my desk, I hadn't even warmed my seat when an unfamiliar number called. I answered. On the other end came my ex-mother-in-law's sharp, nasty voice. "Bella. Have you seen my son's post? You're a woman who can't give birth. You've wasted 3 years of my son's youth." Her tone was high and piercing, laced with a deep, poisonous resentment. "I'm telling you, that 200,000 yuan betrothal gift I gave you back then, you must return every single cent. That was for my grandson. You, a woman who can't have children, what right do you have to touch my family's money?" I opened my mouth, but it felt as if a wad of cotton blocked my throat, not a single word could escape. Anger, humiliation, sorrow, all emotions tangled together, until only a bone-deep chill remained. I don't know how I hung up the phone. All I know is that I was bowed over the cold desk, my whole body trembling like a fallen leaf in the autumn wind. This city where I had lived for 27 years felt for the first time so alien and cold. I felt like a forsaken wraith, abandoned by the whole world, with nowhere to run. No. I had to leave. Escape this place, escape the pointing fingers and vicious curses. On impulse I opened my laptop and typed a resignation letter. With no hesitation at all, I hit send. The sense of relief didn't arrive as expected, instead came an unprecedented bewilderment and emptiness. I packed the few personal items on my desk, cradling a small cardboard box, ready to leave the place that had held all my professional dreams and had now become an arena of humiliation. Bella, wait. The HR manager called after me. The CEO wants to see you. I froze. The CEO? Alex? The man who'd built our vast design group single-handedly, aloof and godlike? I was just an ordinary senior designer at the company. At the annual gala I could only steal a distant glance at him. Why would he want to see me? I carried the cardboard box, full of confusion and unease, and stepped into the huge CEO office on the top floor. Beyond the vast floor-to-ceiling windows, skyscrapers stood in dense rows. Alex sat against that magnificent city backdrop, facing away from me, his posture upright, his presence cold and powerful. He turned, and his excessively handsome face showed no expression. His deep eyes were like a pool of icy water, revealing no emotion. He said nothing, he simply tossed a document onto the coffee table in front of me. The white paper drifted down lightly, but the few bold black characters on it struck my heart heavily. Medical report. In the name field was my name, Bella. And in the diagnosis field were the jarring words, primary infertility. My mind went blank, my body froze from the shock. That report was the one I had taken 3 years ago, accompanied by my former mother-in-law, at a hospital that belonged to her friend. It was that very report that sentenced me. It was that very report that degraded me to the dust in that marriage. It was that very report that became the perfect reason for Davis to abandon me and turn to a new lover. And now, it had appeared on Alex's desk. I lifted my head numbly and looked at him. Alex finally spoke, his voice as cold as his person. My mom forced the marriage, and she pushed hard. You can't have children. He tapped that report with his finger, enunciating each word with absolute clarity. We marry, you serve as my shield so I can have peace. In return, I'll give you money, give you protection, so you don't have to care about the idle gossip outside anymore. He paused, his dark eyes fixing on me. Each gets what they need. Are you willing? My heart began to race, not from any flutter of affection, but from an incredulous shock so extreme it felt absurd. A contract-fake marriage with a boss I had only met a few times? Use my deepest wound as his shield against family-arranged marriages? It sounded like the biggest joke imaginable. But as I looked into those bottomless eyes of his, at the city outside the window that left me with nowhere to run, I suddenly felt like a drowning person. And he was the only lifeline thrown out to me. Even if this straw were poisoned, I wanted to grab it. I needed a shelter, a place to catch my breath. I needed a powerful identity to shut the mouths that mocked me. I looked at him, my throat dry as it tightened, and then, as if compelled by some force, I nodded. I will. Uttering those 3 words felt like I had drained every ounce of strength from my body. It was a desperate, all-or-nothing resolve, a gambler's kind of madness. Alex's face remained expressionless, he only nodded lightly. Very well. See you at the Civil Affairs Bureau entrance at 9 tomorrow morning. The next morning at 9, I arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau entrance on time. The sunlight was blinding, yet I felt a chill run through me. Alex's car arrived punctually as well. He stepped out from the back seat in a neatly tailored black suit, which made him look even taller and more upright. The whole procedure was unbelievably swift. Filling out forms, taking photos, stamping. When those 2 little red booklets were handed to us, I still felt dazed. So I'm married like this? To a man I had only spoken a few words to? Stepping out of the Civil Affairs office, Alex's assistant Kevin was already waiting outside. He respectfully handed me a thick packet of papers. Miss Bella, this is the prenuptial agreement. Please take a look. I took it and opened it. The clauses inside were detailed to a nauseating degree. Article 1. During the continuation of the marital relationship, Party B, Bella, shall not interfere in Party A's, Alex's, private life. Article 2. Party B must cooperate with Party A in attending necessary family and business events, playing the part of a loving couple. Article 3. Party B shall not develop any form of emotional dependence on Party A. Article 4. Upon termination of the marriage, Party A will pay Party B $5 million as compensation, and will present a luxury apartment in the urban district. Each clause clearly bore the two words transaction. I gave a self-mocking laugh. Fine, clean and neat, no debts between us. I signed Bella on the last page. The handwriting was a little distorted from the pressure. Mr. Alex, I look forward to your guidance in the future. I handed the agreement back to Kevin, my tone steady. Alex glanced at me, a flicker of something complicated passing through his eyes so quickly I could barely catch it. Call me Alex, he said lightly. After that, I was taken to Alex's villa. A mansion perched halfway up the mountain, its decor as cold, spare, and unapproachable as he was, radiating a distance that kept people at bay. The older butler respectfully took my luggage and bowed to me. Madam, welcome home. The address madam felt strange and absurd to me. Alex pointed to the secondary bedroom opposite the master and said, "You'll stay in that one." Boundaries were clear, just like that cold contract. I nodded, without objection. That night, I sat alone in an unfamiliar room, watching the myriad lights outside the window, my chest hollow. Just then my phone vibrated. It was a text from my ex-husband, Davis. Bella, you saw my post, right? Forgot to tell you, Hannah's carrying a son. Women who can't have children are born guilty. And you? Are you now hiding alone in a rented room crying? Haha, hope you die alone. Those venomous words wrapped around my heart like a snake spitting poison. I shook with rage, my fingers flying over the screen, wanting to throw the cruelest insults back. Just as I was about to hit send, the door was pushed open. Alex walked in. He looked as if he'd just stepped out of the shower, wearing only a black silk robe, water still dripping from his hair. He saw my reddened eyes and trembling hands, and his brow tightened slightly. What's wrong? I said nothing, only handed him my phone. Alex's gaze swept over the text message, his face, already cool, immediately darkened, and the air around us seemed to drop several degrees. He said nothing, snatched the phone from my hand, and I stared at him in daze. His knuckled fingers tapped a few times on my phone, then aimed it at the two hands clasped together between us. I was still wearing the plain simple ring his assistant had hastily bought at the Civil Affairs Bureau when we registered. He wore the matching men's band on his finger. Click, the photo was taken. Then he opened my Facebook, used my account, and posted that photo to my feed. The caption was equally simple, but loaded with explosive information. Happy newlyweds, Alex. After doing all that, he handed the phone back to me. Almost at the same moment, my phone began to vibrate like crazy, notifications chiming non-stop, as if it might explode. No need to look to know it, my feed was utterly paralyzed. Those who had once mocked me, pitied me, or watched me as a joke would surely have their jaws on the floor now. Bella, the infertile woman abandoned by her ex-husband, actually married the man at the pinnacle of Yun City, the pyramid's apex, Alex? This is more bizarre than a TV drama. A little thrill of revenge, mixed with enormous astonishment, rose in my chest. I looked up at Alex. He had turned away, leaving me with nothing but a cold, hard profile. The first clause of the agreement, let me reiterate, he said lightly. As my wife, you must not be bullied by outsiders. It's your dignity, and it's mine. Having said that, he turned and left my room, closing the door. I stared at the tightly shut door, then glanced down at the photo on my phone of hands clasped together with wedding rings, and for the first time a vague, indescribable warmth stirred in my heart. This cold contractual relationship seemed, not entirely without advantages. My status had shifted from an abandoned ex-wife to the lofty Mrs. Alex. And all of this was only the beginning. In the blink of an eye, it was already the company annual party. In previous years, I had taken the stage as the company's outstanding designer to receive my award. But this year, just 1 hour before the event began, the department director called me into his office and tactfully informed me that my eligibility for the award had been revoked, replaced by a colleague whose seniority was far inferior to mine. Bella, recently, there's been a lot going on at home, your emotions might be a bit unstable. Let the young people have this award for now. The director's words sounded grandiose, but his eyes darted away. I saw it all as clear as a mirror. Someone was obviously pulling strings behind my back. Although the news that I married Alex had exploded in small circles, at the company level, aside from a few top executives, no one knew. To most colleagues, I was still the pitiful woman who'd been kicked out by her ex-husband. I didn't argue, I simply said okay calmly, then turned and walked away. The annual party was ablaze with lights, glasses clinking and conversations mingling. I sat alone in the most inconspicuous corner, quietly sipping juice, watching the music and dances on stage, feeling as if everything before me were a scene from an absurd play. Just then, two uninvited guests carrying wine glasses strode straight toward me. It was Davis and Hannah. As family members, they had somehow also been invited to our company's annual gala. Hannah wore a loose maternity dress, her lower belly was already slightly rounded. She affectionately looped her arm through Davis's, her face betraying unmistakable pride and showiness. She came up to me and, feigning concern, said, "Bella, long time no see. I'm so sorry, this baby really shouldn't have been announced so soon," but Davis was so overjoyed he insisted on sharing the news with everyone. "You won't hold it against us, will you?" Her voice was neither loud nor soft, just enough for the few tables around us to hear. That single Bella gave me goosebumps all over. Davis had his arm around her waist, wearing a smug, triumphant smile. He looked down at me, his tone laced with condescending sympathy. "Bella, don't be too upset. Cheer up, find an honest man to marry someday, don't set your standards too high, after all." He didn't finish the sentence, but his contemptuous gaze landed pointedly on my stomach. Colleagues nearby cast looks that were part sympathy, part taking delight in the spectacle. I clenched the glass in my hand, my nails digging deep into my palm. A fierce sense of humiliation and anger churned in my chest like molten lava. Just as I was about to open my mouth to strike back, the lights in the hall suddenly dimmed. A spotlight swept in, landing precisely on the banquet hall's entrance. The group's big boss, Alex, entered, flanked by a cluster of senior executives. His arrival quieted the entire room instantly. Every pair of eyes fixed on him. He wore a tailored dark gray suit, his posture erect, his presence so powerful it was impossible to ignore. Seeing him made my chest tighten. Why would he come? In past annual meetings, he at most delivered a speech by video. To the astonishment of everyone, Alex pushed through the crowd and came straight to my secluded corner. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, each of his steps felt like it was treading on my heartbeat. The air around us seemed to freeze. The smug smiles on Davis and Hannah's faces froze as well. Alex stopped in front of me. He didn't look at anyone else, he stared at me with complete focus. Then he took off his suit jacket and, with a natural motion, draped it over my shoulders, chilled from wearing only a flimsy dress. His voice was low. "Wearing so little, trying to catch a cold?" I froze entirely, my mind wiped clean. What was he doing? Before I could react, Alex had already taken my cold hand and hauled me to my feet. He raised our joined hands into the air, the 2 simple wedding bands sparkled under the lights. He scanned the room, his gaze finally landing on the ashen faces of Davis and Hannah, and in a tone that declared his claim he said clearly, "Let me introduce everyone to my newlywed wife, Bella." Boom, silence swallowed the entire banquet hall for a full 3 seconds before it erupted. Shouts, gasps, incredulous murmurs, one after another, filled the space. Everyone looked at me as if I were an alien. Davis and Hannah in front of me had all the color drained from their faces, their mouths open wide enough to fit an egg. Especially Davis, his expression shifted from shock, to stupefaction, then to humiliation and anger, so theatrically that it was like a silent film. I could imagine how completely shattered he must feel inside. Just moments ago he had been striking the pose of a victor, flaunting his new love and the child on the way, mocking me, his infertile ex-wife. In the blink of an eye, the woman he had despised to the dust had transformed into the wife of his boss's boss. The slap to his face was delivered too fast, too hard, too utterly. Alex's gaze skimmed over Davis's face, then turned to the vice president at his side, his voice growing cold. "Ryan, since when did our company start allowing relatives to openly harass employees at the year-end party?" He pointed at Davis. "This gentleman, I don't want to see him on my turf again. Please see him out." The vice president trembled, hurriedly nodding and bowing. Yes, Mr. Alex, I'll handle it right away." Soon, 2 tall security guards came over, one on each side, took Davis by the arms, and like dragging a dead dog, escorted him out. Davis struggled and shouted, but it was all in vain. The sight of him being dragged away, disheveled and humiliated, stood in stark contrast to the swagger he'd shown moments before. Hannah stood frozen in place, trembling, her face as white as paper. Alex didn't even bother to spare her a glance. He took my hand and, under the gaze of everyone in the room, walked through the crowd toward the head table's very center, to the seat kept vacant just for him. He pulled out a chair for me and helped me sit. In that moment I occupied the most dazzling spot in the room, wrapped in the coat still warm from his body, feeling the heat from his palm, my heart churning like a storm. Humiliation, anger, unwillingness, all negative emotions were, at this moment, washed clean by a pleasure called vindication. I raised my head and looked at the expressionless man beside me. He really had come to protect me. After the annual meeting incident, my status in the company changed dramatically. Those colleagues who had pointed fingers and gossiped about me before now walked around me when they saw me, or forced out obsequious smiles and respectfully called me madam. The excellent designer trophy I had been stripped of was personally delivered to my desk by the vice president, along with triple the bonus. I knew it all stemmed from that man's protection. But our relationship still remained locked in a cold contract. Returning to that empty villa, he was still the aloof Alex, and I was still Bella, living under someone else's roof. We slept in separate rooms, and beyond necessary exchanges there was almost no extra conversation. Until one weekend afternoon, Alex's mother, Penelope, launched a surprise attack. When the doorbell rang, I was in the living room sketching designs in loose loungewear. The butler opened the door, and a lady in a Chanel suit, dripping with pearls and jewels, swept in flanked by a retinue of servants. She was extremely well kept, looking no more than in her 40s, but the criticism and scrutiny in her eyes carried the oppressive air of someone long accustomed to being in power. "So you're Bella?" Penelope got straight to the point, her tone unfriendly. My palms sweated from nerves and I hurriedly stood up. "Aunt, hello." Just then, Alex came down the stairs. He frowned when he saw his mother. He hurried to my side and, as if it were the most natural thing, slipped an arm around my waist and drew me into his embrace. The sudden intimacy made my body go rigid. I could smell the crisp cologne on him and feel the heat of his palm. "Mom, why didn't you give me a heads up before coming?" Alex's tone sounded a little reproachful, but at just the right amount to convey a son's affection. He lowered his head and introduced me, "Bella, this is my mother." Then he looked up at Penelope and, in an authoritative tone that brooked no argument, said, "Mom, this is Bella, the woman I've chosen to be my wife." The words left his mouth with a lingering tenderness that made my heart skip a beat. Penelope snorted coldly, her sharp gaze sweeping over me. "Chosen to be your wife? Alex, don't forget your marriage has long been arranged, the Lynn family's young lady is still waiting for you. You just went out and dragged some dubious woman back here, what about the Lou family's face?" Her voice was full of disdain. "Also, I heard that this woman has some health issues?" Her words were like a knife, striking my sore spot. My face went pale and I clenched my fists instinctively. The arm Alex had around my waist tightened a little, as if lending me strength. He stepped in front of me and answered in a low voice, "Mom, the person I love is Bella, everything else doesn't matter. As for children, we've already discussed it, we plan to be dinks." His voice was firm and powerful, deflecting all the sharp questions for me. Penelope was momentarily stumped by him, her expression grew even uglier. Dinner was awkward and stifling. Penelope sat in the head seat, constantly sizing me up with a critical eye. Alex, on the other hand, acted like the paragon of a devoted husband. He kept serving me, steamed sea bass, boiled shrimp, broccoli, a full bowl, all my favorites. I was filled with confusion. I remembered never having told him my taste preferences. After the meal, Penelope finally left with her people. The villa returned to its usual quiet. Alex immediately loosened his hand from my waist and went back to his icy expression. He turned to go upstairs, and I, with a keen eye, noticed that the skin behind his ear was, for some reason, slightly flushed. Alex, I couldn't help calling after him, thank you. His steps faltered, he didn't turn, only gave a faint and disappeared around the stairwell bend. I watched his receding figure, confusion deepening in my chest. He'd acted the part too convincingly. So convincingly that I began to wonder whether this was really just a pretend performance. A few days later, the company put an important real estate project up for bidding. I pulled several all-nighters for it and came up with what I believed was a flawless plan. But the day before submission, I discovered my design files had been copied from my computer. My heart was in flames, but I couldn't find any evidence. Sure enough, at the final review meeting, I saw Hannah. She was representing another design firm, and the proposal she presented was 90% identical to my design. It was obvious my design had been leaked and she had plagiarized it. I trembled with anger but had no way to defend myself. Just as I was sinking into despair, Davis sent me a taunting text. "Bella, heard someone copied your design? Haha, serves you right. Without your family's connections you're nothing, couldn't even protect a design, what a loser." I looked at the message and felt sick. The final review began. Alex, as the client's ultimate decision-maker, sat in the center of the judges' panel. When Hannah finished presenting her work with confidence, the room erupted in applause. Everyone believed the bid was hers without question. At that moment, Alex spoke. "Miss Hannah's proposal appears flawless, but it contains a fatal flaw." He pointed to the design on the big screen and pinpointed an exceedingly small detail with precision. "The design of this load-bearing structure does not conform to the principles of structural engineering. If built according to this plan, the entire building will have significant safety risks in the future." Hannah's face went suddenly ashen. Because that flaw was a mark I had deliberately left. It was from the draft stage of my design, a notation not yet finished or calculated. She copied it too hastily, and even that fatal mistake was reproduced exactly as it was. Alex's gaze swept over her coldly. Our Lou Group would never hand a multi-billion project to a plagiarist who doesn't even have basic professional competence. Plagiarist landed like a sharp slap, hard against Hannah's face. She went pale on the spot, teetering. Then Alex turned his eyes to me, signaling me to go up. I took a deep breath, stepped onto the podium, and presented my complete final plan with all the details corrected. No surprise, I won. Alex announced on the spot that my design had won, and in a cold tone hinted to the legal department to thoroughly investigate the plagiarism in this bid, showing no mercy. I stood on the stage, watching the man below who orchestrated plans and whose words carried authority. He simply sat there and easily turned the tide in my favor, consigning the plagiarist to ruin. In that moment, I felt for the first time, clearly, that this protection was far stronger than I had imagined, and far more than what was written in that agreement. My heart, uncontrollably, skipped a beat. The consequences of the plagiarism were even more severe than I had expected. The company Hannah worked for, eager to distance itself, swiftly fired her and issued a notice within the industry. Her career as a designer was essentially destroyed. As for Davis, because he used the company's internal network while leaking my designs, our legal department caught the evidence and he was immediately fired from the company for disclosing trade secrets. In no time, the once glamorous adulterous couple became pariahs in the circle. I thought my life could finally be quiet. I never expected that one rainy night, Davis would actually find his way outside Alex's villa. He was drunk, drenched through, like a drowned dog. He slammed the doorbell wildly, shouting my name at the top of his lungs. Bella! Get out here! You bitch! Have you been sleeping with Alex all along? Is that why you were so eager to divorce me? I stood at the upstairs window, watching him make a scene in the rain with cold detachment. The housekeeper asked if I wanted to call the police. I shook my head. For people like him, ignoring them is the best response. But Davis wouldn't give up. When I didn't come out, he began to rant without restraint. You think marrying into a wealthy family makes you great? You're just a hen that can't lay eggs. Alex married you out of pity, to toy with you. A man of his status would never want a woman who can't have children. His words pierced me again. I turned away from the window. I didn't want to hear any more. A long time passed before it finally quieted down outside. The housekeeper told me Davis had been dragged away by the neighborhood security guards. The next day, I actually ran into him again downstairs at the office. He looked much haggard, his eyes rimmed with red veins. He stopped me, but his manner was completely different from last night. He grabbed my arm and, his voice hoarse, said, "Bella, let's talk." I flung his hand off in disgust. There's nothing to talk about between us. But Davis suddenly said something I hadn't expected. Bella, we've been married 3 years, you've always been so careful, always timing the safe days. Do you think, could it be that the test results back then were wrong? My heart jolted. For the past 3 years, because of that report, I have borne a heavy psychological shackle. I was convinced I was defective, so I couldn't hold my head up in the marriage, and even in our intimate life was filled with shame and resistance. Davis's words were like a key, suddenly opening Pandora's box I had never dared touch. Seeing my shaken expression, he went on, the hospital we went to back then was run by an old friend of my mom. Do you think, could she have tampered with things to make us divorce? There was a strange light flickering in his eyes, a mix of calculation and hope. He was probably at the end of his rope, trying to find some chance to turn things around through me. If the infertility was a lie, could I then possibly forgive him? Could we possibly get back together? I came to my senses in an instant. I sneered, looking at him. Davis, at this point, are you still making excuses for your failure? Does it mean anything? I pushed him away and walked straight into the office building. But his words, like a poison sting, had driven deep into my heart. I was unsettled all day. I began to uncontrollably replay all the details of that hospital visit. My former mother-in-law had accompanied me the whole time, overly attentive. The doctor's look at me carried an indescribable sympathy and pity. When the report came out, my former mother-in-law burst into tears on the spot, took my hand and said, "Good child, your mother doesn't blame you, it's Davis who has no blessing." Looking back now, it all seemed like a carefully staged play. That night, when Alex came home and saw me wandering like a ghost, he frowned. "Why do you look so awful?" I shook my head and forced a smile. "It's nothing, maybe just a little tired." He looked at me deeply, his gaze so penetrating it seemed to see through everything about me. He was silent for a moment, then in a voice that was soft yet resolute he said, "Bella, no matter what happened before, you have me from now on." Those words struck my already turbulent heart like a stone thrown into a stormy lake, sending up even larger ripples. What did he really know? Where had that infertility report he once handed me come from? A terrible suspicion slowly took shape in my mind. I stared at him, and for the first time felt a strong sense of doubt and unease toward him. The Liu family's corporate banquet was scheduled for a weekend. As Alex's newlywed wife, I had to attend. This was my first time formally stepping through the Liu family's gates. The old residence, rich in antique charm, was solemn and dignified, every corner exuded the heritage and rules of a century-old prominent family. At the banquet, I saw the legendary Alex's fiancée, the eldest miss of the Lin family, Catherine. She was strikingly beautiful, but the look in her eyes directed at me was full of undisguised hostility and contempt. During the meal, holding a glass of red wine, she appeared to remark to me casually, "Miss Bella, I truly admire your courage. Alex has quite a temper, and he never likes being plotted against. If you've married in this way, you'd better be careful from now on. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was enough for the people at the same table to hear. Penelope fanned the flames beside her, pointedly emphasizing to the relatives around her, Alex and Bella are close and have decided to be dinks. As elders, we shouldn't interfere with the young people's choices. The word dink pinned me once more to the label of being unable to have children. Throughout the meal I sat on pins and needles, unable to eat. Facing a table full of greasy, lavish dishes, I was suddenly overcome by a wave of nausea. I clapped a hand over my mouth and dashed for the restroom without caring who saw. Ugh, everything in my stomach churned up. I leaned over the sink and vomited until I could barely see. After I caught my breath a little and splashed cold water on my face, I looked up and saw my pale reflection in the mirror, and an absurd thought, without any warning, barged into my mind. Me, could it be? No, impossible. I'm infertile, aren't I? I shook my head, trying to drive the ridiculous idea out of my brain. When I returned to the banquet hall, I found the entire room had fallen into an eerie silence. Everyone's gazes were all fixed on me at once. Those looks were filled with curiosity, suspicion, and shock. Penelope's face turned an even darker shade. She stared at me so intently it was as if she wanted to bore a hole through me. Bella, she snapped sharply, breaking the silence, aren't you incapable of having children? That single question voiced what everyone was thinking. I stood frozen, my hands and feet cold, not knowing how to answer. At that moment Alex stood up. He hurried over to my side and steadied my trembling body. There wasn't a trace of panic on his face, instead, he was unusually calm. He scanned the room and, addressing his mother whose face had gone ashen, announced in a measured tone, "It seems our child-free plan will need a slight adjustment." After saying that, he ignored everyone's reactions, grabbed my hand, and strode out of that suffocating family dinner. In the car, I remained in a haze. Alex said nothing and drove straight to a private hospital. Registration, tests, blood draw. I felt like a puppet, letting him arrange everything. An hour later, we were sitting in the doctor's office. The kindly female doctor held a stack of reports and wore a radiant smile. "Congratulations, Ms. Bella, you're 6 weeks pregnant. The fetal heartbeat and embryonic bud are both fine, the baby is very healthy." Boom, like a thunderclap exploding inside my skull, my mind went blank in an instant. Pregnant? I'm really pregnant? Wasn't I infertile? My hand trembled as I took the small black and white ultrasound printout. The tiny gestational sac on it shone like a dazzling star, stabbing at my eyes. I was completely stunned. I slowly lifted my head and looked at Alex sitting beside me. His face did not show the surprise I had expected, there wasn't even a ripple. In his eyes there was instead, relief, and a deep, almost triumphant joy. He watched me staring dumbly, reached out, and gently covered my hand holding the ultrasound sheet, his voice low and tender. "What are you still standing there for? Now we can go get a real certificate." His words struck me like lightning, cleaving through all my confusion. I suddenly remembered everything. He had tossed me that perfectly timed infertility test result. He used your inability to have children as the best reason for our sham marriage. That overly convincing acting when he defended me in front of his mother. His intimate knowledge of my taste. A terrible, complete truth snapped into place in my mind in an instant. This had all been designed by him from beginning to end. That infertility report, he had deliberately shown it to me. This seemingly absurd marriage was, from the very start, a snare he had laid for me. I was played. Thoroughly, completely played. I jerked my hand back and the look in my eyes was full of shock, suspicion, and a towering rage kindled by being deceived. Back in that cold villa, I could no longer keep up the appearance of calm. I slammed the flimsy prenatal test and the once heavy infertility report down onto the coffee table in front of Alex. "Alex, aren't you going to give me an explanation?" My voice trembled with anger, edged with sobs. What was this? I sounded like a fool, a pitiful joke. Abandoned by my ex-husband's family for being infertile, then courted into another marriage by a different man using the same claim of infertility. My life felt like a puppet show being manipulated by others. Alex looked at my swollen, reddened eyes. The calm on his face finally showed a crack. He was silent for a long time, long enough that I thought he would never speak. Then, in a tone almost like a sigh, he said, "Yes, I knew from the beginning that you were healthy." His words confirmed my worst suspicions. I laughed in anger, but tears betrayed me and slipped down my face. "So what, Mr. Alex? You went to all this trouble to marry me, the woman everyone mocks as infertile, for what? To enjoy the thrill of rescuing Cinderella? Or because watching me danced around like a fool gives you some perverse sense of achievement?" Alex's Adam's apple bobbed. He stepped forward as if to touch me, then drew back under the force of my hateful gaze. "Bella, let me explain." He told me that 3 years ago, at an industry design exhibition, he first saw me. I was standing by my work, radiant, explaining my design philosophy to visitors. "There was light in your eyes," he said. "From that moment, I remembered you. After that, I quietly followed everything about you through various channels." He knew I was married, knew I was unhappy in the marriage, knew I had given up many things I loved to placate my in-laws. Until he learned about my divorce and the rumors that I couldn't have children. "I had someone look into it." Alex's voice was low and hoarse. "That medical report was forged by your ex-mother-in-law. She bribed a doctor at her friend's hospital. From the start she despised you, she just wanted an excuse to force you to divorce Davis." I went numb, a sharp pain stabbing my chest. So the guilt I had carried for 3 years was the result of such a vicious plot. "I knew you were divorced, knew everyone was mocking you. I saw you forcing a smile at the company, and I..." There was a kind of pain in Alex's voice I had never heard before. "I wanted to help you, to shelter you under my wings, but I had no standing. Exactly at that time, my mother used every means to force me to marry Miss Lynn, in order to secure the Lynn family's support on the board. I needed a shield, an absolutely safe one that would make my mother shut up for a while." He looked at me, his eyes full of complicated emotions. "And the rumor that you couldn't have children became the best excuse. I showed that forged report to my mother, told her I would marry no one but you, and that I was willing to be child-free for you. She was angry, but to avoid a complete break with me, she had to compromise for the time being." "So you used my deepest wound as your weapon?" I looked at him coldly, tears streaming down my face. "Yes." Alex did not deny it, he admitted it calmly. "I admit my methods were despicable. I used your predicament and manipulated you. But Bella, my feelings for you are real." He stepped forward, this time, disregarding my struggles. He gripped my hand tightly. His palm was burning hot, his strength so great I couldn't break free. "Everything I've done has been to protect you, to be able to stand by your side openly, to turn this fake marriage into a real one." He looked into my eyes, those usually cold, deep orbs now full of fragility and pleading. "Bella, you can be angry, you can scold me, you can hit me. But please, don't leave me, don't leave our child." Listening to all the astonishing things he said, my thoughts were a muddled mess. I had been deceived by my former mother-in-law's family, and now I was being manipulated by this man who claimed to be saving me. My life is like a vast whirlpool, and he is the one who personally dragged me into it and then tried to lift me back to the surface. Should I hate him? But everything he has done for me, every single thing, was meant to stand up for me and back me up. Should I thank him? Yet all of this began with a carefully planned deception and manipulation by him. Inside I am angry, resentful, wronged, and yet there is also a faint, indescribable stirring of gratitude. I yanked my hand away from his, stepped back, putting distance between us. "Alex, let me be alone for a while." After I finished speaking, I turned and walked into the bedroom, slamming the door shut. I needed time to digest this earth-shattering truth, to sort out my tangled thoughts. The news of my pregnancy spread as if it had grown wings. The happiest of all was Alex. He no longer hid his emotions, concocting various nourishing meals for me in endless variations every day, tending to my needs with the utmost care. That nervous, fussy demeanor was a world apart from the decisive, ice-cold CEO I remembered. And the one who fell apart the most was Davis. He somehow heard about my pregnancy and completely lost his mind. He must have gone to verify what I'd said and finally discovered that Hannah's claimed month of pregnancy didn't match at all. He was cuckolded, raised another man's child for him, and even abandoned me, the ex-wife who could bear children and was pregnant with the heir of a wealthy family, for that bastard's offspring. That realization was enough to damn him forever. That day, he stormed down to the ground floor of our company like a madman, and in front of all my colleagues, he barreled toward me and blocked my path. His eyes were bloodshot, his face gaunt. He grabbed my wrist with one hand and, his voice hoarse, demanded, "Bella. You're pregnant?" I knew it. I knew you were fine. It's mine, isn't it? We only divorced a few months ago, this child has to be mine. Bella, let's get back together. I looked at his frenzied state with nothing but scorn and disgust. I wrenched my hand free and stared at him coldly. Davis, have you lost your mind? Open your eyes and look at the calendar. How long has it been since we divorced? Count the months of my pregnancy again. Do you think that's possible? No. I don't believe it. He screamed like a gambler who'd lost every chip, hysterically roaring, "It's all my mother. It's all my mother's fault. She deceived us. Bella, I'm the one who wronged you, can't we start over? I'll break up with that bitch Hannah right now." As he spoke, he actually plopped down and, in front of all the watching colleagues, knelt. He clung to my legs, crying his eyes out. "Bella, give me one more chance, for the sake of our 3 years together, forgive me this once." The colleagues around us pointed and whispered, passing judgment. Just as I was about to call security, a black Bentley rolled up silently at the curb. The car door opened and Alex stepped out. Seeing Davis kneeling at my feet, his face darkened in an instant, so stormy it seemed it might drip. He strode over in long, determined steps, said nothing, balled his fist, and drove it hard into Davis's face. With a dull thud, Davis let out a miserable cry and was knocked to the ground. "My wife, my children, you think you have the right to pester them here?" Alex's voice was cold. He pulled me behind him, using his tall frame to shield me completely, then loomed over the disheveled Davis on the ground, his tone full of contempt and scorn. "I should thank you for your blindness back then, it gave me the chance to have her. Now take your daydreams and get lost." Having said that, he didn't even deign to look again, he simply gave a signal to the bodyguards who had followed him. The two men in black immediately stepped forward and hauled the still wailing Davis off the ground like trash. The farce was over. Alex turned around and instantly shed all his rancor, anxiously checking me over. "Were you scared? Did he hurt you?" In his eyes was unabashed worry and tenderness. I looked at him, then at Davis being dragged away, his back a picture of despair and humiliation, and in that moment the balance in my heart tipped decisively. Perhaps being schemed against by a man like this isn't such a terrible thing after all. At least, beside him, it seemed I truly didn't have to fear anything. I shook my head and whispered, "I'm fine." He seemed to exhale in relief, then, very carefully, took my hand. This time, I didn't pull away. The news that I was both pregnant and infertile, a lie, completely detonated the Liu household. Penelope was the first to lose her composure. She asked to meet me at an upscale cafe. She no longer wore that feigned politeness from before, instead she slid a check across the table. 50 million, she said, lifting her coffee with an air of haughtiness. "Leave Alex, have the child, and the Liu family will take care of it. For a divorced woman like you, this sum will guarantee your comfort for the rest of your life." Her tone was like dismissing a nuisance, full of condescension and insult. I looked at the check and laughed. I picked up the check, and under Penelope's stunned gaze I tore it into pieces and tossed them into the nearby wastebasket. "Penelope, I think you're mistaken." I looked at her calmly. "First, Alex is my lawful husband. Second, the child in my womb is mine as well. I want nothing else, I only want them. You." Penelope's face drained with rage at my action. Don't be shameless. You think carrying a baby makes you superior because of your child? I'll tell you this, as long as I live, you can forget about setting foot in the Liu family's home. Catherine stepped forward from the side, looping her arm through Penelope's and sneering at me. Miss Bella, one shouldn't be too greedy. You used the lie of infertility to marry in, and now you want to use a child to blackmail your way to power. Your scheming really opens my eyes. I couldn't be bothered to argue with them, so I got up to leave. I knew reasoning with them would be pointless. Sure enough, within a couple of days, the web was flooded with smear pieces about me. Calculating female designer marries into wealth, every move premeditated, fakes infertility to win sympathy. Exposing the false crown princess of the wealthy, how she rose to power, ex-husband just kicked out, seamlessly transitions to group CEO. All kinds of indecent headlines, paired with candid photos of me, painting me as a vicious woman who would stop at nothing for money. My colleagues at the company started looking at me differently, shifting from the previous awe to a complex mixture of suspicion and contempt. I shut myself in the house, ignoring everything, focusing on nurturing the baby, but my mood was still inevitably affected. When Alex learned of it all, he was furious. He came home, saw how haggard I looked, and held me to his chest with pain. Don't be afraid, I'll handle everything. Right in front of me he called his assistant and gave one instruction, at all costs, find the mastermind, and bankrupt every media outlet spreading the rumors. Then he convened an emergency board meeting. In front of all the directors, including his mother and the representatives of the Lin family, he announced that he would transfer all his shares in the Liu Corporation into my name. The decision hit the board like a heavyweight bomb, blowing everyone there into chaos. Penelope was so furious she nearly fainted on the spot. Alex! Are you crazy? For this woman, are you willing to throw away the Liu family? Alex's reply was thunderous. If this family cannot accommodate my wife and my child, then I would rather not have this family. He had a huge fight with his mother and they nearly severed ties. That evening, he came home with deep fatigue etched on his face. He didn't tell me about the fierce conflict at the board meeting, he simply held me and soothed me softly. But the more he acted like that, the more my heart ached. He told me that the Lin family and the Liu family were deeply tied up in business. His mother and the Lins had long wanted to join forces to pull him down from the CEO position and put their own people in his place. This marriage had evolved from being merely his personal shield into a battlefield where he defended his business empire. And I, along with our unborn child, had become his greatest vulnerability and also the armor he most wanted to protect. I realized I could no longer hide behind him as before and simply accept his protection. I took his cold hand, looked into his eyes, and said, word by word, Alex, this time, we face it together. Surprise flickered in his eyes for a moment, then was replaced by deep emotion. He squeezed my hand back tightly. All right, we'll do it together. In that moment, we were no longer the contractual parties A and B, but true comrades fighting side by side, like a couple who sustained each other through thick and thin. Now that we had decided to fight together, I could no longer sit and wait to be destroyed. Penelope's weak point was the Liu family's reputation and interests. Catherine's weak point was the Lin family's business. And my greatest weapons, besides Alex's love, were my own professional skills and intellect. I got in touch with a very reliable private detective I had met before while collaborating on a project. I gave him my late mother-in-law's name and the information about the hospital from back then, and told him to thoroughly investigate the forging of the medical report, to make sure they found both witnesses and physical evidence. At the same time, I shut myself in the study and began, using my professional knowledge, to frantically research and analyze every real estate project Lin's company had been involved with in recent years. Especially the projects they had partnered on with the Liu Group. Relying on a designer's intuition and my familiarity with the industry's sleights of hand, I quickly picked out a few clues from a pile of seemingly flawless design plans and financial statements. In one large mixed-use commercial complex project, there was a huge discrepancy between the publicly reported building materials and the actual structural load-bearing parameters. Behind that, there was a strong likelihood of serious corner cutting and tax evasion. I told Alex what I had discovered. He looked over the thick stack of analysis reports I'd compiled, his eyes full of shock and admiration. "Bella, you've given me a great gift." In the days that followed, we divided our tasks clearly. Alex took the front lines, dealing with the family's opposing forces and stabilizing the company. I stayed in the rear, continuing to dig up dirt on the Lin family, supplying him with the lethal ammunition. Every night we met in the study to exchange information and discuss strategy. The feeling was tense and electrifying, yet it was laced with an unprecedented sense of tacit understanding and intimacy. Soon, the Lu Group's annual shareholders' meeting was convened. Penelope and the Lin family planned to join forces at this meeting to launch an attack, citing the CEO's chaotic marital life damaging the group's reputation and errors in decision-making as reasons to force Alex out. As Alex's wife, and the nominal holder of some of his shares, I attended this smoke-free war for the first time in an official capacity. The atmosphere in the conference room was heavy. The Lin family's representative struck first, listing how Alex, for my sake, had disregarded the group's interests and suppressed partners. Penelope stood nearby, wringing her hands in grief and echoing his accusations, playing the part of a mother heartbroken by an unfilial son. Just as they thought victory was assured and were preparing to move for a vote to remove Alex. Alex, however, smiled faintly and signaled for silence. Then he handed the microphone to me. "Now, please welcome my wife, Ms. Bella, to show everyone something." Under the stunned gaze of the entire room, I walked calmly up to the podium. I said nothing superfluous and directly pressed the play button on the projector. A clear recording filled the conference room. It was a conversation between my former mother-in-law and that doctor from back then. In the recording, they were haggling, plotting how to fabricate an infertility report to force me into a divorce. "Doctor, once it's done, that 100,000 yuan, you won't be shorted a single cent. Don't worry, this report is flawless, so convincing even she'll believe it herself." The recording finished playing, the room erupted. Penelope's face flushed the color of raw liver. She never would have imagined that the weapon she'd used to attack my uncertain origins was such a filthy fraud. That wasn't all. I then displayed on the big screen the preliminary evidence I'd found that the Lin family's commercial complex project had skimped on materials and falsified data. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, copies of this evidence have been anonymously submitted to the tax authorities and the Quality Supervision Bureau. I scanned the room, my voice was low but each word carried weight. I believe an official investigation will follow soon. Sitting at the Lin family's representative seat, Mr. Lin's face went deathly pale in an instant. None of the shareholders present were fools, they immediately understood what this meant. Once the Lin family were investigated, Lu Corporation and the projects they were collaborating on would inevitably be affected, stock prices would crash, causing devastating losses. And the instigators of all this were none other than the Lin family themselves, who wanted to take Alex down, together with their accomplice Penelope. Penelope looked at me, her eyes full of incredulous shock and fear. She probably never imagined that the woman she had always looked down on, whom she thought she could manipulate at will, would possess such a cool mind and ruthless methods. I stepped down from the stage and returned to Alex's side. He gripped my hand tightly, his palm was warm and strong. There was no triumphant joy in his eyes, only full-blown pride and an unsoftened love. I knew we had won the first round. And we had won handsomely. The aftermath of the shareholders' meeting hit harder than we had anticipated. The tax authorities and quality supervision bureaus moved swiftly, the Lin family's companies were placed under investigation, all accounts were frozen, and the stock plunged limit down day after day. Overnight, they fell from the clouds into the mire. They were left scrambling and no longer had the strength to make waves within the Lu Corporation. Alex seized the opportunity to carry out a thorough purge of the board, rooting out every influence the Lins and his mother had planted inside the company and locking control firmly in his own hands. Penelope suffered heavy losses from investing in the Lin projects and was proven to have colluded with them to the detriment of the company. At a joint proposal by the board, most of her powers and dividends were stripped away. She aged 10 years overnight, her former arrogance gone. As for me, I wasn't idle. Armed with more complete evidence the private investigator had found, I officially filed a lawsuit in court. The defendants were my former mother-in-law Nelson, and the doctor from back then. The charges were defamation, infringement of reputation, and forging medical documents. On the day of the trial, the evidence was conclusive, leaving them no room to deny it. My former mother-in-law sobbed uncontrollably in court, confessing and begging me for forgiveness. I only looked at her coldly. In the end, the court ruled that both were guilty. Not only did they have to publicly apologize to me and pay financial compensation, but that Dr. Zhang also had his medical license revoked, and my former mother-in-law consequently ended up with a criminal record. Davis's life was even more of a disaster. He lost his job, and because of the notoriety from the lawsuit, no company dared to hire him. The house in his name had been bought outright by my parents when we married, and the divorce agreement granted it to me. He was driven out and left homeless. The most devastating blow was that he finally got the DNA test results for Hannah's child. The results showed the child was indeed not his. He stormed into the hospital and caused a huge scene with a newly postpartum Hannah. Their altercation became widely known, and it ended badly. They say that Hannah's so-called lover, upon learning that her reputation was ruined and that she intended to pin the child on him, vanished without a trace. A few days later, Hannah, weak and fragile, somehow found her way to my villa. She knelt at the door clutching that tiny infant, begging me through her tears to show mercy and to persuade Alex to spare her. I watched her haggard figure on the surveillance feed through the doorway, feeling not a flicker of emotion. I said to her only, "When you were at the annual party, publicly caressing your belly and mocking me, did you ever think to let me go?" After that, I had the butler cut off the intercom. All the hatred, all the entanglements, were settled in that series of reckonings, dust falling into place. Those who once hurt me have all received their due retribution. I stood on the villa's terrace, watching the distant sunset, and let out a long breath. The boulder that had pressed on my heart for 3 years was finally moved away. I felt an unprecedented calm and relief. After all the turmoil passed, life finally returned to its rightful peace and sweetness. My belly grew day by day, and Alex grew more and more anxious. He turned down all unnecessary engagements and came home on time every day to be with me. He read prenatal stories to me, walked with me, and even learned how to massage my swollen calves. The icebound CEO who ruled the mall with an iron will had, in front of me, become a gentle, attentive, almost clumsy, expectant father. Penelope had come a few times too, her attitude making a complete 180. She no longer mentioned Catherine or spoke those cutting words, instead she cautiously brought me various tonics and supplements, her speech full of flattery. I knew she wasn't afraid of me so much as of what I and Alex could accomplish together, enough to shake the entire Liu family. As for her overtures, I neither accepted nor rejected them, merely keeping up a surface politeness. Some hurts, once inflicted, can never be mended. One weekend morning, sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, gently spreading across the bedroom floor. I was still half asleep when I felt someone lightly kiss my forehead. I opened my eyes and saw Alex's handsome face magnified close to mine. His gaze was full of tender longing. "Awake?" he asked in a low voice. I nodded. He suddenly rose from the bed and then did something I hadn't expected. He took a deep blue velvet box from the bedside table. Then he dropped to one knee at the foot of my bed. He opened the box to reveal a uniquely designed, dazzling diamond ring. Alex tilted his head back, staring at me with burning eyes, a touch of nervousness and expectation in his gaze. "Bella, I'm sorry." His first words were, surprisingly, an apology. The way we began was full of my scheming and deception. Though it was all to win you, it was not a noble beginning. So now, I want to give you a brand new start, untainted by anything. He told of 3 years ago, at that design exhibition, when he fell in love with me at first sight. He told how afterward he became like a voyeur, quietly watching everything about me, collecting every piece of information he could find. When he spoke of learning about my divorce, He described the ache in his chest and that instant when an unshakable resolve rose in him to win me at any cost. They all say I'm the favored son of heaven, a business prodigy. But in front of you, I'm no hero, I'm even a somewhat despicable businessman. But I'm willing to trade everything I have left for a future where I can love you openly and spend the rest of my days with you. My eyes instantly grew wet. I smiled, but tears streamed down like beads snapped from a string. I reached out my left hand to him. Mr. Alex, for the rest of my life, please take care of me. He eagerly took the ring out of the box, and carefully placed it on my ring finger. The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made to measure for me. He bowed his head and planted a reverent kiss on my ring. Then he rose and held me tight, holding me close and close. A few months later, our child was born. A very beautiful boy, with his brows and eyes like his, and a mouth like mine. I lay on the hospital bed, watching Alex gently cradle that tiny, soft infant, his face wearing a tenderness I had never seen before, utterly exquisite. He held the child, walked to the side of my bed, bent down, and placed a gentle kiss on my sweat-dampened forehead. There was a note of satisfied sigh in his voice. Finally waited for you, I'm glad I didn't give up. The same sentence, at the beginning of the story, was a sword that pierced my heart. But now, spoken from the mouth of this man who loves me deeply, it became the elixir that healed all my wounds. I looked at the two men before me, one older, one younger, the most important men in my life, and my heart swelled with a warmth and happiness I had never known. I knew that my once broken life had been pieced back together by this man, bit by loving bit, with tenderness and deep affection. And it was more brilliant, more dazzling than before. My rebirth, from this moment on, truly began.